Daniel wasn't supposed to be home that night. He'd told me he'd be away until Sunday, a work trip, one of many, and I had let myself believe I had more time. More time to figure out what I was doing. More time to pretend that it wasn't really wrong, not yet. That I could stop before it crossed some irreversible line. But time, it seemed, had run out. I heard the front door open. A soft click, subtle but unmistakable, followed by the muffled sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor. My heart stuttered. For a brief moment I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe. But then I turned around. And there he was. Daniel stood in the doorway, his travel bag slung over one shoulder, still wearing the coat he must have left in that morning. His face was unreadable, still and calm in a way that made my skin crawl. His dark brown eyes flicked from me to Ethan, who was sitting beside me on the couch, shirtless, his crumpled clothing scattered like evidence across the floor. The scent of sweat and perfume hung heavy in the room, the unmistakable stench of betrayal. You didn't need words for what had happened. The truth was right there, in the quiet, rotting mess of it all. Ethan jolted to his feet, stammering something unintelligible as he scrambled to gather his clothes, his hands fumbling like a child caught red-handed. But Daniel didn't look at him, didn't even acknowledge him. His eyes were locked onto mine, unmoving, unblinking, and I found myself wishing, desperately, that he would yell, scream, curse me out, throw something. Anything. Because silence, that silence, was worse than anger. Daniel, My voice came out as a whisper, cracked and broken, but he held up a hand, stopping me before I could say anything else. Calmly, he let his bag slide off his shoulder and placed it on the floor. Every movement was slow, deliberate, like he was holding himself together through sheer force of will. Ethan hovered awkwardly at the edge of the room, half-dressed and paralyzed by guilt. I should go, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Daniel still didn't glance his way. That was answer enough. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed his shoes and slipped past Daniel, avoiding eye contact like it would burn him. Then the door shut, and the apartment was left in a vacuum of silence. Just the two of us. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like my lungs had folded in on themselves, and no matter how hard I tried, nothing came in. I wanted to speak, to explain, even though I had no excuse that could make this right. But Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't decode. He should have been furious. He had every right to be. But instead, he just looked exhausted. Like something inside him had finally given up. I came home early, he said at last, his voice calm, too calm, and that tone twisted something deep in my gut. I wanted to surprise you. I swallowed hard. Daniel, He let out a short, dry chuckle. There was no humor in it. Just bitterness. Defeat. You know, I used to think that if this ever happened I'd be angry, he said. I pictured myself yelling, throwing things, demanding answers. He shook his head slowly. But I don't feel any of that. His voice was steady. Too steady. And that scared me more than any outburst ever could. I just feel tired. That was when it hit me. Not in some cinematic thunderclap moment, but in the quiet slope of his shoulders, the faint tremble at the end of his words. I'd broken something. Not with malice, but with carelessness. With selfishness. Something we had spent years building, shattered in a night I thought I could compartmentalize. I never wanted to hurt you, I whispered, though the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. He sighed and ran a hand down his face. For the first time he looked away from me. But you did. The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to move, to reach for him, to say something that might pull us back from the edge, but I didn't even know what words were left to say. And then, quietly, he turned and walked to the dresser. That's when I saw it, the moment that crushed me more than any anger or rejection ever could. He pulled open the top drawer and took out a small navy velvet box. My stomach dropped. Seen that box before. Weeks ago. Tucked behind some socks when I'd been looking for my earbuds. I hadn't opened it then, but I'd known. I had let myself imagine the moment he'd get down on one knee, how I'd cry and say yes, how it would be perfect, the beginning of the life we'd always dreamed of. He opened the box now, holding the ring between us, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the low light just right. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned it over once. "I was going to propose this weekend," he said, barely above a whisper. "I spent months planning it." Tears blurred my vision. My throat closed around the rising ache in my chest. "Daniel, please." He snapped the box shut with a soft click and slipped it into his pocket. That movement, that quiet final gesture, was worse than a slap. "I hope." He looked at me for the last time, eyes hollow and tired. "I hope he was worth it." And then he turned, walked out the door, and he never came back. That, more than anything, shattered me.